right, welcome everybody. Good to see you. Today the title is Throw Down the Crocodile. And this is a little bit of a continuation from Wednesday, but it'll be a different angle. And today we're going to cover one step in a man's uncomplicated spiritual training regimen. And we're going to see how God begins our training by showing that our three basic needs will be covered if we serve Him. And we must know for sure that we're going to have good health, secure finances, as well as protection from our enemies if we're really going to lay our lives on the line. Now think about people in service industries. How long would somebody stay in the Army or the Air Force or Marines if they didn't get a paycheck? How long would somebody stay as a policeman in the rough streets of Detroit without a paycheck, without any health insurance, without any protection, no gun, no backup? Not many. And so people typically will not lay their life down for God unless they're sure and have been assured that God is going to take care of them physically, mentally, spiritually, take care of their health, their finances, and protect them from the impending storm. And see, God knows that before any of us will fully commit ourselves to walk with power and to enter the fray, that our basic needs must be met. This has always been the case. We all think, yeah, I would do it. If God asked me to do something, I'll do it. But most won't. Most can't see themselves because there's too many of life's pressures. Training time. Let's take a look at how God trained Moses to stand up to one of the most powerful and ruthless world leaders of all time, the Pharaoh of Egypt. And with the Spirit of God, we too can conquer anything. In fact, Romans, doesn't it say that we're super conquerors? We're more than conquerors? From the Message, Romans 8:38 and 39, don't turn there. But it says, I am absolutely convinced that nothing dead, angelic, or demonic, today or tomorrow, high or low, thinkable or unthinkable, absolutely nothing can get between us and God's love because of the way Jesus, our Master, has embraced us. A little different version there. I love it. There's nothing can stop us. God has supplied all our need according to His riches and glory. We just have to believe it. And we've talked about that over the past few weeks, how to get ourselves to believe. That's really step one. But now we're going into training. This is more of spiritual training. This is where we really want to get in life. If you want to see the exceeding abundance, it will only come by way of operating the manifestations. Let's also keep our eyes open to see God's promised prosperity, health, and protection, which is our real point today. And today we're going to see what it took for God to retrain Moses. Now, of course, we always think of him as a guy with a beard. You've seen the movie enough times. Every springtime you watch the Ten Commandments. And, but you got to understand, this guy was born and then put in a little basket, floated down the Nile or a canal, picked up by some young lady. She says, Daddy, can I keep him? He goes, sure. And so she keeps this kid, this Hebrew kid. Now, his mom and sister helped raise him. They became the wet nurse for him. And they taught him some things, but he was still raised like the Egyptians. He was trained in their religions because their whole life revolved around their religion. the multiple gods that they served and they worshiped. Look at the hieroglyphics. It's crazy. Later on, if we have time, if I decide to do this, but the 10 plagues, they're all going against a certain god of Egypt. Every one of those was to back off a certain one of the Egyptian gods that they worshipped. It was sort of an in-your-face kind of thing. And then we won't today, but maybe on next Thursday that we meet, we'll see that where these plagues really came from. Was it God? Or did the devil send them on his own people? So pretty interesting, but that's not for today. So Exodus chapter 3. And we're going to go ahead and read. We're going to read verses 1 through 4 here. I'm going to read it from the Message. You can use whatever version you have in hand. And it says, Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the west of the wilderness and came to the mountain of God, Horeb. The angel of God appeared to him in flames of a fire blazing out of the middle of a bush. He looked. The bush was blazing away, but it didn't burn up. Moses said, "What's going on here? I can't believe this. Amazing. Why doesn't the bush burn up?" And God saw that he had stopped to look. Got his attention. God called him from out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Yes, I'm right here." See, Moses had been raised in the royal household of Egypt as an adopted son of the Pharaoh's daughter. And he was born a Hebrew slave, but he was raised Egyptian royalty. He had been both a pauper and a prince. When he was about 40 years old, he finally became aware of his people's plight, of their horrible conditions as being slaves, and he decided to do something about it on his own. He took matters into his own hands, and he killed an Egyptian who was abusing an Israelite. But it didn't escape notice. And Moses became a wanted man, and for fear of his life, he left the country and went into exile some 300 miles away across a desert, across the Red Sea, onto the Arabian Peninsula, in a land called Midian. And Moses married the daughter of a man named Jethro. And Jethro was a priest of Midian. Now this is interesting. And Jethro was a descendant of Abraham through the child that he had with that other woman. Okay? And he was a distant relative to the Israel enslaved in Egypt. Now here's a question. Did this Jethro, this priest of Midian, have the Spirit of God? Was he a true prophet of God? All Israel was in Egypt. All the Hebrew people were in Egypt. Now this guy is called a priest of God. And remember, he's not part of the children of Israel. Moses visits with Jethro. This is later on, and he respects him so much and confides into him, and he even listens to him after he leads out these millions of people across the Red Sea. He meets with Jethro, his father-in-law. And he confides into him, and he listens to him, and he heeds his advice. You think Jethro was something? On a Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit more about this whole Spirit of God thing, because it's a lot bigger than we see. It's a lot more vast than we understand. That's why there's a resurrection of the just and the unjust, besides the gathering together. There's a lot more people that do things for God than we really realize. Now read Exodus 18 if you want to see for yourself. Don't turn there now. Just you can if you want, but I'd appreciate if you keep listening. And now Jethro was a man who loved God, and he helped Moses get his head back on straight after he fled Egypt. How mixed up would you be after just killing somebody? After having, and then your own people turning on you, saying that they were going to like turn you in. And then having the most powerful army in the world that could come after you anytime they wanted to. How weird would that be? To be wanted. And then also to be raised in all those religions and all that education and stuff, but also be raised partially as a Hebrew. How weird would it be? How mixed up might somebody be? God had a man called Jethro who was the perfect guy to retrain Moses. God will always have the person you need there to help keep your head straight. If you want it, if you want help. There will always be someone there for us when we need help. Now, he worked for this priest as a shepherd for 40 years. 40 years. As well as being his son-in-law. So they ate together. They did Christmas and Easter together. Probably not, but you get the point. They did holidays, whatever they had in those days. They did stuff. And, Moses had, I think, 2 sons with the daughter of Jethro. Pretty wild. See, there was plenty of time around meals to chat about the God of Abraham. Because this priest of Midian would have understood this God of Abraham. After all, he was a spiritual leader. So this is a setup now. Now, promised prosperity. It's in our daily prayers. Better health, more money. Take care of me, God. Everybody in the world wants that at some point, multiple points in their life. Promised prosperity. Before people will take a stand for God, they need to know that all their needs will be supplied. And it's a human requirement to help free our believing so that we can serve. If we don't feel like our needs met, we're not going to be able to fully give. You can't. Too concerned about yourself to be concerned about someone else. See, if it worked for Moses, it's going to work for us, what I'm going to teach today. So God lays it out. Go to Exodus chapter 3. And we have to back up a little bit to verse 19. And it says, "And I'm sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go." Now, this is God preparing Moses for what he's about to do. He goes, "I'm sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. Not by a mighty hand. It ain't gonna happen." Verse 20, I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in the midst thereof. And after that, he will let you go. Okay, God says, he ain't going to let you go, but once he sees what I'm going to do, he will let you go. See, so he's telling Moses, this is what's going to happen. You're going to come up against a conflict. You're going to hit a brick wall. It's going to seem impossible. It's just you against Pharaoh and his whole army. You against a whole country. But we're going to win. God already knew what would happen. He just needs Moses to believe him. God already knows where your abundance is. God already knows where your health is. God already knows where your protection is. He already knows. We just have to believe. Verse 21, "And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians." That's pretty wild. Now, I don't know much about slavery, except for what I saw in a couple of movies and stuff. and stuff you read in the internet about the sex trade and all that stuff. It's bad stuff. Do they think kindly to slaves typically? No. No. And it says, I will give the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Now, to Moses, that's like, what? That's crazy talk, God. That's crazy. And it shall come to pass that when ye go, ye shall not go empty. You're not just going to walk away from there empty-handed with your pockets hanging out and a hungry stomach. But every woman, I like here, it doesn't say man. This is who got the prosperity. Yeah, it says, but every woman shall borrow of her neighbor. Now, this word borrow is a very poor translation. And the word borrow, in simple terms, is ask, but it's more in the terms of require. You are going to give me what I ask of you. Now, this is a slave talking to their slave owner. How does that usually go off? Yeah. And of her neighbor. And this neighbor doesn't mean, they didn't like live next door. They didn't have a trailer house next to a mansion, you know. I mean, well, maybe they lived in a little shack, you know, surrounding, you know, some Egyptian rich person's place. But every woman shall borrow, demand, require of her neighbor. And a neighbor is really an Egyptian citizen. It's a citizen. That's all the word neighbor means. Or we could say slave owner, because this is who it was. And of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver. Now you're going to demand this. I want those jewels. Jewels of silver. I want that gold. You're going to give me that gold. This is what the women had to do here. And raiment. I want that clothes. You know, I like that Gucci handbag, you know, Louis Vuitton or whatever. And ye shall put them upon, well, I wouldn't say that, put them upon your sons, you know, but the jewels, whatever, and upon your daughters. And ye shall spoil the Egyptians. Now you got to remember, the Egyptians spoiled the Israelites. They came for help one time, and they took everything of theirs. The wealth of all the Hebrew people ended up in the hands of these people. God was just giving them back what was theirs. Remember, read the record about Joseph sometime. See what happened. They took the wealth of the world, Egypt did. They were the only ones that could grow things because they listened to a man of God, a man with the Spirit of God, Joseph. See, God shows them how they will be prospered. Now, it hasn't happened yet. He's just telling them what's going to happen. He's preparing Moses' mind. Now, remember, this is all happening. You got to just take a mind picture. This is all happening while Moses is talking to this burning bush. It's a talking, burning bush that doesn't seem to stop burning. So God knew what would get Moses' attention. I mean, how weird would that be if a tree started talking to you? Hey, Mark, come here, buddy. You know, it's just crazy stuff. And so, now remember, these neighbors and sojourners weren't friends. They were people who thought they owned you. They could walk in and out of your house at will and take anything they wanted. After all, they own you. You're just an item. You're nothing. You own nothing in their eyes. And look at the mental image that God's laying out for Moses. Remember, he was on the other side of this. He saw both sides because of his mom and his sister, but he saw the slave side, he saw the owner side. He was raised like that. Now, mind you, Moses is 80 years old here. golf shoes, pants hiked up, past his belly button, plaid pants, a little Frank Sinatra kind of hat, what do they call those? Fedoras, I mean, he's the old guy. He was in the Florida of the Middle East. That land of Midian was an area where there was grass and all that stuff. It was ample. It was a great place. Good golf courses, spring training for baseball, all that kind of stuff. And so he's 80 there. He's got a lot of life under his belt. Now God's telling Moses that even in a circumstance that seems impossible, God will prosper his people. You're going to be richer than you can imagine. And I think if God can do it for them, he can do it for us. We just have to know and totally expect the health, expect the abundance, expect the protection, expect the direction. We have to believe it. Excuses. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now remember, still that bush talking here. You gotta think of it. Whether it's night or day, I don't know. I like to think of, I don't know when I guess if he had the sheep, then it's probably daytime, unless he's staying out with them. Imagine the change of lifestyle for Moses from being a rich kid in a palace to having to sleep out with the sheep. But it took that time to get his head turned around. It took time for him, those talks with Jethro and people who respected him. So it took some time for him to get around to really doing what God wanted him to do. Verse 1, and Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken to my voice. God's talking about Moses is talking about the people. God told him to go and talk to these children of Israel, and they're going to follow you out of that country after a few miracles, a couple of things. And he goes, they're not going to believe me, and they're not going to hearken to my voice. For they're going to say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. What if somebody told you that God talked to them? I mean, the world says that if you talk to God, you're religious. If God talks to you, you're crazy. That's how the comedians think of it. But comedians always have a little beat on the pulse of society. Somebody's telling you God told him something. And what if some guy walked up to you, hadn't seen him in 40 years? Oh, by the way, we're going to get on out of here. I'm going to free you from slavery. Let my people go. I mean, what kind of a person does it take? So they're not going to believe me, for they'll say the Lord hath not appeared to thee. And these are normal excuses. I mean, you'd think or say the same thing. I just find it crazy that he's talking to this bush, and he knows it's an angel or God. And these are the excuses that keep us humans down. We talk ourselves out of things before we ever get started. Too old to change professions. It's too hard to look for another job. I'll just put up. I don't like my job, but I'll just keep putting up with it. Oh, well, I've had this nagging cold for 4 years. I guess I could put up with it for another 20, 30, whatever. I mean, you just think about what we do to our own minds, what we say to ourselves. That's that self-talk. That's what we're talking about here. They're not going to listen to me. Didn't God just tell Moses that he, God, the Creator, will do whatever it takes to help them. If you read the preceding chapter, I'll read a little bit of it from the Message in just a second, but he just told Moses a few moments before he said, I will be what you need me to be. I will become what you need me to become. I exist for you. I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I will supply. Is it any less for us? No. God exists to bless you too, to heal you too. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Do you expect it? Moses was concerned that the people wouldn't receive him. Verse 11 of chapter 3. This is from the Message. Moses answered God, but why me? What makes you think that I could ever go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? I'll be with you, God said. And this will be the proof that I am the one who sent you. When you've brought my people out of Egypt, you will worship me right here at this very mountain. Now, that's a mind picture. So I start thinking, all these people are trying to figure out where Moses crossed the Red Sea and all this stuff. There's maps. It's all over the place. But one thing we know is that he's going to end right back up there again with all those people. Right there. What a mind picture. God's just trying to build his believing. Look, he hadn't even stepped back into Egypt yet. He hadn't even left the burning bush yet. And he goes, I'll be with you. And here's a proof that I'm that sent you, that, I'm going to, when you've brought my people out of Egypt, you will worship God right here at this very mountain. Now, this is in the Arabian Peninsula. Verse 13, then Moses said to God, suppose I go to the people of Israel and I tell them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what's his name? Now, and what do I tell them? Now, I started thinking about this. Why would they ask what his name was? Because the children of Israel had started absorbing, after those hundreds of years, into the Egyptian culture. The Egyptians always talked about their gods. They had a god for rain, a god for fertility, a god for, a god for death, a god for birth, a god for, sex, a god for, they had gods for everything. There's even some Christians that have different things like that. You see, but the Romans, the Greeks had gods for everything. It's called polytheism. They just believed in so many things. And he says, I go there. Then Moses said to God, suppose I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of our fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what's his name? What do I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Tell the people of Israel, I am sent me to you. And you just a little Bible study. It doesn't even take much, and you'll see that really means I will become what you need me to become. Just read the Amplified Bible. It says that, but then you study it out a little bit more. It's, I exist for you. I will be there for you. I will do anything for you. See, deep down in their collective memories, God knew that some of the Hebrew people would have remembered the vastness and the greatness of God, and some wouldn't. Usually the people who don't believe you will be the most vocal. That's why we don't live for our critics. You live for people who love you. You try to live for people who criticize you, you're not living anymore. Focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. You know, they had been slaves for so long, Moses doubted that they would even listen. How low would somebody's believing be if you just been raised a slave, and then your kids are going to be slaves, and your grandkids are going to be slaves? Protection. Back to Exodus 4. Now, as far as I can tell, Moses is still in front of this amazing, burning, talking bush. How crazy would it be to talk to a burning, talking bush? But God knew that this would get Moses' attention. God knows exactly what it will take to get your attention. When you're ready to finally prosper. God knows exactly what it'll take to get your attention when you're finally ready to get that health. Like the old saying, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Verse 2 of Exodus 4. And Moses said unto him, What's in thine hand? Now God, it says, and the Lord said unto him, What's in your hand? And he said, A rod, or my walking stick. Okay, you had the walking stick. Like the people who hike up Mount Fuji always have a little walking stick, or you see hikers on the trail with their two little poles, so that it helps them walk. Walking stick was just like carrying a cell phone. I mean, you wouldn't leave home without it if you were a man. It's like wearing a hat in the 1800s. Everybody, you see all the old pictures, even kids, everybody had hats on. Well, that's a walking stick. Not everybody needs a walking stick because they're lame. It just was part of what you did. You carried a walking stick. Probably a bopping stick too, if he was a shepherd, because he was a shepherd. And so God said, What's in your hand? Like God didn't know. And he said, A stick. It's my stick. It's my staff, my rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. So what kind of serpent probably was it? Probably a poisonous one. And I looked it up. There's a lot of poisonous snakes in the Arabian Peninsula. One of them is the cobra. So we don't know if this was or not. It doesn't say. But this serpent here does mean a snake. And I love it. Now it says, and he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled before it. Now think of this 80-year-old man. He throws his stick down, all of a sudden, it starts slithering around. It's like he goes, feet don't fail me now. And he shuffles out of there, scuffing up his little patent leather white shoes. I'm sure Moses was a tough guy and a vital man, okay, but it's still funny to think. And, imagine an 80-year-old Moses splitting. Now, here this bush is burning, throws a stick down, turns into a snake, boo, he's gone. The opposite way from that snake. I mean, there's been many times I've run down the trail and then laying across that trail, usually in the spring or fall, it'll be warming, and I'll leap over the things. And because usually they're not they're just what is it? Yeah, they're lethargic. Yeah, but what I mean is the type of snake, they're just a constrictor. They're I just forgot the name of them, but they so they're nothing. They don't care. I mean, they could strike me, but it's not going to do any good. But I remember one time I was running and jumping, and I looked down and realized it was literally a rattlesnake. But it didn't, when I run, I'm low and slow anyway, so, when I jumped, I'm not jumping too high. So I'm like going over this thing, hoping it doesn't notice me. And it didn't even move. It didn't make any difference. And but it's just funny. But I didn't want to be. See, it's a rattler. It's like I don't even want to touch the other ones. Much less rattlesnake. So he fled from it. And the word fled can also be translated vanish. It's like, boop. I remember I told you last week I played that game Fox and Hounds, and I remember I was in Texas. I was a scout there as well, and I was in this farm. We always camped out in these farmers' ranches, and I was laying down, and all of a sudden, stepped onto the blanket I had was a bull. And there was about a 4-foot barbed wire fence right next to where I was laying. I was in sort of the shadow and thinking nobody could find me. Well, next thing I know, I had just, from that laying position, I jumped over that fence. I vanished. That bull was here. Oh, I never tried to jump. I don't like to jump over barbed wire fences. It's too much at stake. So, but it must have looked like a poisonous snake. And I'll send you a couple of links on the web too. And verse 4, and the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. So God must have been yelling from the bush because Moses was way over there. Hey, come back and take it by the tail, Moses. And so he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may be, and now this is for his learning, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob hath appeared unto thee. Now, who wants to be near a venomous snake, much less pick one up by the tail? And see, caught it is the same word as straighten it or harden it. He picked up the snake, and he might have pulled it straight like his staff, and then it turned right back into his stick. Because it says it straightened it. That's what the word caught it means. Or he shook it straight. I don't know how it was. I remember swimming in my mom's lake. She had this house in Texas, and I had just gotten married with Josephine, and I didn't mind swimming in a lake. It's sort of nasty, the bottom is sometimes, but I was swimming, and all of a sudden I saw these two things swimming up to me, and it was these cottonmouth, which is a poisonous snake in Texas. And they were swimming up to me, so I just turned around and swam back to the shore. They probably weren't going to bother me, but I don't want to take a chance. Heard of people getting bit in the water before, you see, but it's a weird thing. So he picked up the snake, and like he might have pulled it straight like a stick. But I think, now look how God is showing him that he'll protect him, right? Now we're going into healing. Now we're going to see God's healing. God showed Moses his protection. He showed his promised prosperity, and now healing. Verse 6, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. Like Napoleon. You know why they only show certain amount? A lot of people have their hands in their jackets or one behind the back in old paintings. No, it's because they got paid by the hand. The artist charged by the hand, because hands are hard to draw. And so, then you don't have to do a whole hand. So fingers are hard to draw. So no extra charge for that one. It has nothing to do with the teaching. But so he put in, it says, put thine hand in thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom under his robe. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. It had turned white. And leprosy is an infection, inflammation. It's lesions. It's just, his hand would have been gnarled and ugly, and the skin like bloodless white. Like if you squeeze your finger real tight and it turns white or something like that, that's what his hand would have looked like. Would have been ugly. Just rotten, dying, gnarly skin is what he saw. Verse 7, and he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand in his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. Oh, it doesn't say God told him to. He just did it. I never noticed that before. And he plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. That's pretty cool. That's healing. That's fancy healing. I wonder how much sickness and disease that God just keeps away from us, that the enemy would heap on us if we didn't have God's protection. Think about it. Think about your immune system. You got things floating around inside of you that kill some people, but your immune system keeps it down, keeps it at bay. You know, I mean, it's amazing what God does for us that we will never see. God heals. Now, Moses is ready to serve. And he asked Jethro if he can take leave. He goes, I need to go back to Egypt, and I got to help a few million people get out of there. And Jethro goes, okay, go ahead. It's all right. Now, he was talking to his boss and his father-in-law, but he was also the priest of Midian. He was a big name. One text says the priest means like the excellence. He's like the excellence of Midian. He was the man, Jethro. Look at the respect and meekness that Moses learned. Would he have been taught that as a child of the Pharaoh? You don't ask anything. You just take. You want a woman? Come here, woman. You know, I mean, it's crazy. You want what's in their house? It's yours. So he packed up his wife and his boys on the back of his family donkey. I might call it an ass trovan. And he trucks about 300 miles, back across the desert, back to Egypt. And then he has to go and find his brother. So he has to start talking. He's got to remember the language. They spoke Egyptian and maybe some Hebrew, some Aramaic. It would have been pidgin style by then after all those years. Moses spoke whatever language that the priest of Midian spoke. It's been 40 years he's been away. And so he asked God for some help in talking to the Pharaoh. And God told him that his brother Aaron, who was still a slave in Egypt, was good with that language. See, Aaron must have been amazing as well. Now, God really wanted Moses to do this alone, but he allowed him to take his brother. If you read it, it wasn't like it was... God wasn't real happy that he didn't believe in himself that much, but he let Aaron come. Verse 6, and Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them. So did they. Oh, this is chapter 7. I'm sorry. Exodus 7. Exodus 7, we're going to read 6 through 13. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them. So did they. I like that twice. And Moses was 80. Years Remember, a score is 20. 4 times 20 is 80. And Aaron was 83 years old, 83. So we went back. He'd been gone 40 years. And this is when they went and spake to the Pharaoh. So they had to. Well, let me just read here. Verse 8. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, now remember, time has passed. Moses is now in Egypt. God's talking to Moses again here. And verse 9. And Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show a miracle. When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show a miracle for you. I want to see a miracle. Then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. Now, hadn't they already seen this trick? Now, they hadn't. Now, Aaron hadn't. Moses wasn't like on a tour, He wasn't going from comedy club to comedy, magic clubs, showing his one trick, Okay, but this is not the same Hebrew word as serpent or snake as it was in chapter 4. It's not the same Hebrew word. And when God was showing him, when he threw that stick down, it became a venomous serpent, and he fled from it. Remember that? This serpent is the Hebrew word nakash, and it means a monster or a crocodile. Different mind picture here. A little more serious. Snake's bad. Crocodile, very bad. Now God's preparing them. He's telling them what they're going to do now. Because he didn't want them to be freaked out either. He's saying, oh, look, this time when he throws down his stick, it's not turning into a snake. It's turning into a crocodile. Now, Moses and his older brother have gained audience to the head of a powerful country. These two old men walk in there. And it was just the two of them and God. You're never alone. Never, ever, ever alone. Verse 10, and Moses and Aaron went unto Pharaoh, and they did as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants. You think he had military guys in there? He had all his entourage in there. The Pharaoh, he had to be careful who he let into his chambers or whatever, his throne room. And Aaron cast down his rod and before his servants, and it became a serpent. And that's that word, nakash, monster. A monster crocodile. This had to be a shocker. Aaron throws down his fancy, bedazzled walking stick, whatever was fancy. And those are the cases you had to get it from the iStore, from Best Buy, a case for your walking stick, whatever color it was, he threw it down. And it turns into this crocodile who didn't want to be there. The average weight of a crocodile is 500 pounds. That's big. But a large male can get up to 1,600 pounds. Be 12, 16 feet long. That's quite a monster. I mean, that's longer than my van. And it weighs as much as a small car. It's a lot of weight. You'll enjoy some of the pictures. I got one of a crocodile snagging the trunk of an elephant, and the elephant's trying to shake this thing off. It's crazy what these things can do. It wouldn't have been a tiny baby croc like you used to be able to buy on the internet, or not on the internet, and by mail. You could buy crocodiles and alligators, and they'd mail them to you. Well, it's not that. This was a monster. And Aaron threw down that stick, turned into this huge monstrous crocodile. And like a wolf, the Nile crocodile is the apex predator of the Nile. It will attack anything. I see right here, I got a picture in my notes right here of one attacking an elephant, a full-grown elephant. I mean, they are monsters. They're beasts, these crocodiles. They're fearless. They're the apex predator. They're aggressive. They will attack and try to kill anything that they'll possibly let itself be killed. A zebra, fish, wildebeest, elephant. It doesn't matter. They can clamp down with 5,000 foot-pounds of pressure. They're not letting go. Their teeth go backwards, so it's like a fish hook. Once they grab on, it's almost impossible to get them off. Verse 11, then Pharaoh called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt, and they also did in like manner with their enchantments. See, Pharaoh called his most magical, merry men, and they were able to replicate this stick into crock trick. That's heap big magic. That's heap big magic. If we had time to look at the 10 plagues that it took to finally let God's people go, we'll see that the magicians, they replicated the first two, the blood and the frogs. They were able to do that, but none of the rest of them they could. How much learning on what really caused there's so much learning on what really caused these plagues, but that teaching is not for now. Verse 12, for they cast down every man his rod. These are the magicians and the wise men, and they became serpents, crocodiles. Now, what would that floor look like? But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. Now, I used to always think of a snake just eating another snake, glomp, 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 just swallowing it whole, gulp, 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 and they're gone. This is crocodiles. They don't swallow things whole. They tear things to little pieces, and then they eat the chunks of it. You think that room was a mess? Pretty crazy stuff. And Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, and he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. He already told him. Now that would have been a horrible mess, because those things are messy eaters. And the Pharaoh didn't let him go after that. And this monstrous attack is what the Pharaoh and his men saw. And look at all God did to help Moses get to the place that he could believe to do his job, to complete his calling. What will God do for you if you want it? It's got to be bigger, better, faster, stronger than even what Moses saw. Because we are amazing peoples. We're designed to do exploits, exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. Look at all God did to help him. In closing, thoughts of sickness and death and lack are what hold humanity hostage. What stops you in your tracks? It'll be one or the other or the combination of those three. We too have already been given power over death. We too can shake off a crocodile. Hebrews 2:14-15, don't turn there, but or you can if you want, but it says, for as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy. And that word destroy there means to stop him in his tracks. It means to render useless him that hath the power of death, that is the devil. Jesus Christ can stop the devil in his tracks. You think he can protect you? He's still working today. He's not sitting behind some big oak desk. He's moving and grooving and doing stuff for us. Jesus Christ is on fire, baby. And deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. That's what holds us back, is that fear of death, that sickness, that lack of being taken care of. See, our training starts with self-talk. Then thinking those apex thoughts, hauling out that mental trash with our forgiveness and loving others the way that God loves them. Next, we got to know that if we're really going to get involved, that God will not only protect us, but he will prosper us far beyond belief. and he will keep us healthy. That was his lesson to Moses. That's his lesson to us. So how do we stop our enemy in his tracks? We take a stand and do what God called us to do. What you called you to do. Every one of us is a little bit different. And as we do that, that is throwing down the crocodile.